Neil.
This is Hayao Miyazaki, legendary film director, co-founded Studio Ghibli. It's a safe bet to assume you already know who this man is. Now for his films, the villains are in a morally gray area. They're not straight up stereotypical bad people, but people who want to do good, but the means that which they take to achieve these good goals can be considered evil. Miyazaki does this because of his belief that the notion of there is a good side and a bad side is in and of itself an evil narrative. A narrative made by evil men to fuel the propaganda machine. Rather, it's important for us to look for the good within the evil, and the evil within the good.
I had to tell him I worked for the government.
Really?
The city health inspector's not afraid to pull strings.
This is Harvey Dent, soon to become Two-Face. Now you all have probably seen this clip and know which clip I'm about to pull up, so here it is.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Poor Harvey fulfilled his own prophecy. He lived long enough in his story and ended up being a villain.
Pochi sanno in vero chi siamo. Questo è come ha da essere.
This is Niccolo Machiavelli,
Pizza time.
a philosopher and advisor to kings of the olden days, when city-states and kingdoms of Europe played political games to achieve their reach of power by any means. Machiavelli really understood the human condition, so much so that he wrote a book called The Prince, so any up-and-coming leader of an empire could read and understand what must be done to run and maintain their empire. In this book, he writes, "A prince, and especially a new prince, cannot observe all those things which are considered good in men, being often obliged, in order to maintain the state, to act against faith, against charity, against humanity, and against religion. And therefore he must have a mind disposed to admit itself according to the wind, and as the variations of the fortune dictate, and as I said before. In other words, be ready to commit evil deeds to maintain your empire if forced." But what's the point of mentioning these three men? They all have one thing in common: the idea of good and evil. The idea that good can oftentimes be a facade to hide evil. Throughout man's history, men have debated and pondered on this concept of good and evil, some narratives painting it in a black and white landscape. There is good, and there is bad. Good is good, and bad is bad. But what if that were not the case? What if in order to maintain good, you have to do shitty things? Things that most people would denounce in a heartbeat. What if good was an excuse for evil men to use to commit atrocities against innocents? All because these evil men hailed themselves as the good force in this fight. What if evil truly was born out of good intentions? This dilemma has plagued humanity from its conception. This dilemma also plagues the story and characters of Arcane. Many of the prominent characters wanting to resolve an issue, but ending up creating a bigger problem. It's this evil within the good that I want to focus on for this video essay. Looking at the characters that I chose for this video, seeing their choices, and to see where the evil lies. Whether it's an unintended outcome or a deliberate, conscious choice. Some will either fall under Miyazaki and other philosophers' point of evil within good, the Machiavellian way of thinking, or the Harvey Dent curse. But either way, these characters committed evil actions. When it comes to the topic at hand, Violet is the least problematic when it comes to creating problems out of good intentions. But there is one little bitty issue that, if taken care of earlier, would have prevented hardships down the line. Jinx. One can understand and sympathize with Vi for wanting to reconnect with her lost sister after being imprisoned for so long. But with being hidden away for so long, you tend to miss out on the news. Critical news like Powder, now named Jinx, has become a crazed killer for Silco's needs. So of course, when she finally sees the new Jayce, Vi wanted to do whatever she could to help her sister come back to the light. A noble good deed. But in this want to save her sister from herself, Vi is unable to deal with Jayce on multiple occasions. Multiple times, Jayce could have been stopped, preventing future unfortunate events to unfold, yet Vi always got in the way. Her naive notion that her sister could snap back only led to more death and destruction. Granted, Vi later on realized Jayce could not be saved. Then once again believing Powder is still in there after Jayce mellowed out, but at that point, the damage was already dealt. Vi, instead of trying to save her sister, allowed Jayce to be stopped at any cost. Jayce wouldn't have killed the only chance of peace between Piltover and the Undercity. It's this good intention of wanting to help Jayce revert back to Powder that gives birth to evil in the form of opportunities. Opportunities for Jayce to take hold and bring down chaos onto the world. Youth wanting to prove themselves amongst their peers. Poor Powder was looked down upon by the majority of those around her. An inconvenience, at best. Despite all of the doubt, Powder wanted to show her usefulness. Luckily for Powder, an opportunity will arise to allow her to do just that. Being the only one who didn't go to rescue Vander from Silco, Powder got to work by creating a bomb with the Hex crystals. A bomb that will, in theory, liberate her comrades. Oh, but how things went south so quickly. For once, Powder's inventions actually worked. It did end up blowing up a huge hole in the wall, but that explosion also ended up killing 2 people. What adds insult to injury is the group came very close to creating their own escape without Powder's help. So if Powder would have stayed behind as instructed, everyone might very well escaped with their lives. Powder's desire to help and prove she is no Jayce led to her loved ones dying and setting course to a very dark future for herself. Once again, showing how evil can take hold of a situation even when the intentions were good. Out of all the characters, Caitlyn's unsavory actions to achieve a higher overall good outcome might be the funniest. After the loss of her mother, Caitlyn had a burning desire to bring Jayce to justice. Revenge was the main focus on her mind. Safety and security for Piltover comes second. Regardless, bringing the one who shot down the only plan of a peaceful conclusion would be a net positive. But how Caitlyn goes about it is laughable. Laughable with how easily she does things that the people before her tried so desperately to prevent. After the attack, the Council understandably wants blood with the Undercity. Their ideal course of action would be sending down an army of enforcers to put the Undercity to her knees. Caitlyn, on the other hand, knows sending down enforcers would only make the situation worse for Piltover and her partner, Vi. It's not the Undercity that needs to be punished, it's just Jayce that needs to have her teeth kicked in. So instead of sending a whole battalion of enforcers, Caitlyn rounded up a few folks to form a small special strike force to strategically hunt down and take down Jayce. That in and of itself isn't much of an issue. It's the strategy that she employs is where we start to question the ethics of Caitlyn. While looking through the data banks of her family, she found a project her late mother funded. A project that aimed to clear this toxic smog called the Grey from the Undercity. In the voiceover Caitlyn's mother made along with the schematics of sealing off key points, she specifically said,
"The people of the underground deserve to breathe."
And what does Caitlyn do? She releases the Grey back into the Undercity to help her and the team get the Jinx. I guess the Undercity doesn't deserve to breathe. This seemingly cruel action is something Machiavelli would approve of. Caitlyn was ready to commit an evil against people to achieve the ultimate goal to not only stop Jinx, but also stop Topside from sending a full-scale invasion down to the Undercity. A choice like this would be difficult to make for anyone with their moral compass in check. But Caitlyn, wanting to avenge her mother, made the choice without a second thought, for the pure reason to kill Jinx in the most efficient way possible. Maybe it was right on her part to side with a lesser evil to prevent a greater evil. After all, nothing is truly black or white. Of course, it doesn't help her case that she failed to kill Jinx and joins forces later on with Ambessa to get Jinx, which of course leads to the Undercity being overrun by enforcers and Noxian soldiers, setting the whole city on lockdown in the hopes of capturing Jinx, which ironically makes Jinx a hero in the eyes of the people of the Undercity. When evil rears its hideous face over and over again, one might have to ask if those who claim to be on the good side of things are becoming the villains, or were the villains the entire time. Safe to say, Caitlyn's ultimately selfish ambitions led to her down a dark, bloody path. But folks, it only gets worse from here.
I won't fail. I swear it.
Oh, the poor naive fool. Being saved with the help of a mage, Jayce made it his life's mission to replicate the magic conjured up to save him and his mother. Once unlocked, Jayce wants to bring his magic to the common people to help them live better lives. Hextech, a magic-infused technology that will revolutionize the world. This would be Jayce's gift to humanity, a tool meant to aid, not destroy. But as stated before, nothing is truly black and white. Hextech isn't all just good things. Jayce was warned time and time again to not interfere with magic, but he pressed on until he succeeded. Piltover prospered with Hextech, sure. With some foresight, we'll get to see that this dream come true was on its way to become a never-ending nightmare. Before that nightmare begins, Jayce has to make some tough choices. His goal for Hextech was for pure innovation, advancing society by making life easier. To hammer in that point, he and Victor promised to never make weapons with Hextech, a promise that was begging to be broken. A war was brewing between Topside and the Undercity, with Jinx creating chaos and Silco manufacturing Shimmer. The council demanded action. Hextech needed to be weaponized before the Undercity uses the gemstone Jinx stole to create a weapon. As much as he tried, Jayce eventually gave in and created a hammer infused with a gemstone to help him raid a Shimmer factory. Broken promises, tools for peace, made instruments of death. The more Jayce diverts from his original plan, the more he gets lost in all the violence, which unfortunately for Jayce will cause him to accidentally kill a child worker during the raid of the Shimmer factory. Sure, these actions he took were Machiavellian, but all this could have been avoided if only Jayce listened to Heimerdinger, because the greatest evil of all that Jayce committed was giving birth to Hextech. You see, the hex cores they were creating weren't just simple devices. The magic within these gemstones, once activated, seemed to have a living quality to them. A living quality that can degrade and corrupt living matter. Victor and Jayce took this finding as a setback instead of a warning, a red flag. Topside had a hex gate that runs on multiple gemstones, forming a hex core. This hex core, with the constant use and abuse of Piltover, will begin to become corrupted, spreading its rot around its surroundings. This corrupted hex core will be used by the enlightened mystic Victor, thanks to Hextech altering his body, to create a supercharged energy source that would change everyone. A change that Jayce will have to see when the hex core brings him to a reality where the whole world is devastated by Hextech. All living things ravaged by its corruption. Now understanding the evil that will be unleashed onto the world because of his invention, he knew what had to be done. He needed to destroy Hextech. He needed to kill Victor. He might have killed an innocent child on accident, but killing Salo and Victor was an active choice. Evil deeds needing to be committed in order to stop the destruction of the world. But do you know the funny thing about Jayce and Hextech? If Jayce never made Hextech, life would have been better for everyone. Without Hextech, both Topside and Undercity would have thrived and united as one great nation. We know this from the reality Echo was thrown into during the Hexcore incident. The one thing that Jayce intended to make the world better ended up being the worst thing for the world. Jayce's ignorance of this ticking time bomb brought on so much pain and death for all of Piltover. So much so, Jayce's death was almost deserved. Make no mistake, even if you try to do something good, there will always be a chance that something will go horribly wrong. Your good intentions pulled right from under you, causing you to fall into pure horror. As much as Jayce wanted to do good, he continued to have to do evil things to get things back on track, until he finally had to undo everything to save the world. The worst out of all the characters mentioned, and honestly the most heartbreaking, Victor is Jayce's science partner. With his help, they both were able to crack the runes that activated the Hex Crystal. But Victor has a problem. He's dying. In a desperate attempt to find a way to save his life, Victor experiments with a Hex core, infusing it with living matter, but the results always turned out the same. Any living matter that comes into contact with the core will eventually rot and decay. This alarming finding will cause anyone with plenty of time to experiment with the hex core in a slow way. Victor had no such luxury. He tested the hex core on himself. Victor's body began to change, his legs turning into a dark purple, the flesh converting into a metallic-like rock formation. But despite this semi-transformation, he was still alive, and for a moment able to walk without his cane. Of course, there was an unforeseen consequence to the tampering of the hex core. Skye was sucked inside the hex core. She was presumed dead until Season 2. Victor's situation was concerning, but stable for now. That is, until the council hall was blown to smithereens by Jinx. On the brink of death, Jayce enclosed Victor in a Hextech-like box, which enveloped him like a cocoon, very reminiscent of Han Solo and Carbonite. But when he wakes up and sees things differently now, that's when things begin to crack. At this point, Victor hasn't turned into a villain. In fact, he doesn't turn into a villain at all through his Hex Core arc. It starts off seemingly okay. Victor has gained powers that can cure people from their addictions and afflictions. But things take a sharp and twisted turn when he transforms into his final transcended form. He wants to cure humanity of its very nature, taking away man's choice and making all minds linked into one. This extreme measure will require a total cleansing with the help of the Hex Core that powers the Hex Gate. That, of course, leads to Piltover's total decimation. Something Jayce knows all too well of. But how could Victor do something like this? The old Victor would have never agreed to do this. Again, the vast difference between the two versions of Victor is heartbreaking.
There is always a choice. choice is false.
We have to look at Victor's motivation. He helped create Hextech because he wanted to help people. He wanted to create cures for diseases, help nurture disabilities. Victor wanted to end human suffering. This remains a constant, but the means of which to reach this end are wildly different. Victor, by his transcended state, thought he knew what needed to be done to bring forth a new evolution to humanity. He just had to take the human out of the equation, and how he would do that is by taking the choice of man by force. Not only was his mind, body, and soul corrupted by the Hex Core, but his good intended resolutions became compromised as well. Victor was the most blind in his crusade to cure humanity out of the rest of the cast. Everyone else had a level of guilt having to commit the evils they swore they'd never do. Not Victor. He was ready to do anything to reach his goals, regardless of how fucked up it was. In another reality, Victor was successful in completing his mission, but seeing the horror that came from it, sought a way to amend his mistakes. He would go to alternative realities to go to the same event that started it all. Jayce and his mother about to freeze to death. Victor kept giving different versions of Jayce different runic signs so he can find the right combination to stop the madness. So essentially, what Victor did was gamble with people's lives from different dimensions. He condemned different timelines to the same fate just to find that one that survives. He could have stopped and allowed Jayce to die on that day, but he kept gambling. Victor, while not having malicious intentions with his actions and aspirations, became the villain of the story. He was once hailed as a hero, then as a savior, then finally a harbinger of death. He lived long enough to where he became the villain of his own story. To paint life arbitrarily as black and white is to be begging for pain. Man's comfort in the belief that there are set good and bad is ultimately their downfall. Their eyes easily tricked by empty promises and deceitful propaganda. Evil resides everywhere. It can spring out of anywhere. Even the purest of hearts can be tainted by this darkness. So when men of power dance with the devil, you must open your eyes to see whether they dance either to maintain good or to spread death.